Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello everyone, and thanks again for joining us here for Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy. On the satellite, you can see a frontal system pushing right up into the northern southeast coast, actually up in and past Whitehorse today, and then trailing back across the Panhandle, where the heaviest amounts of rain occurred down over the southern southeast coast. And then that front also kind of extending back along the North Gulf Coast here. Not really all that well defined, and most of the precipitation in the form of rain and snow from Yakutat on down to the southwest to about Kodiak Island. Some of that moisture now getting up to the Kenai Peninsula and starting to show up along the North Gulf Coast. Otherwise, just high clouds across the Copper River Basin on down into Cook Inlet. Some breaks out here to the west and southwest, and then an area of cloudiness here associated with snow from St. Lawrence Island across the Seward Peninsula on up into the northwest interior there, and even on up to the Arctic coast. A little breezy conditions up there as well, and not too bad here over the Bering Sea, the Pribilofs Peninsula, and eastern Aleutians, and then the clouds associated with a big storm, rather intense storm center there south of the Aleutians, with the central pressure of about 948 millibars, and you can see the clouds advancing northward. With that, the main precipitation area, though, still to the south of the chain, expected to stay there. On the chart today, there's that intense low center down there, just barely on the map there. Up to the north, an increase in the cirrus, just some isolated snow showers there over the west central Aleutians. Otherwise, pretty dry for the remainder of the area there. This weak low and associated moisture of that staying west of the Pribilofs, and kind of a trough extending to the north, and then this trough here associated with some light snow from St. Lawrence Island up across the western Seward Peninsula there and across the Noatak Valley off to the northwest, and amounts generally an inch or less in that area over the last day or so. Patchy fog along the Arctic coast, temperatures below zero there. Some variable clouds, maybe a few flurries there over the north central interior. Otherwise, pretty dry for the remainder of the interior. And again, this front bringing an increase in the moisture and some rain and snow again from Yakutat. Some of that working in toward the Wrangell Mountains in the form of snow, mixed precipitation southwestward to about Kodiak Island. Pretty windy, good gale force winds with this in advance of the front there. Kodiak State Airport had gusts over 50 miles an hour earlier today. And otherwise, Augustine Island about the same there, with again gales back along the North Gulf Coast, and the heaviest rainfall occurring down over the southern Panhandle there, where the front's kind of dragging northward there, and but not all that heavy, about 0.8 of an inch or a half inch to 0.8 of an inch falling over the southern areas, less up to the north. And for tonight, we'll see that front really dissipates and a new wave develops, and we've got a warm front coming northward. So that's going to keep it wet down over the southern areas. It'll dry out here to the north with most of the moisture, maybe some scattered snow showers up around the Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay area. Haines, possibly Juneau, and showery conditions continue for the North Gulf Coast, form of rain or snow, and that extends back with the low pulling northwestward here. That's going to continue to push that moisture inland. So for northern Cook Inlet, some isolated snow showers later on tonight. Most of the moisture will be western Cook Inlet on over to the Alaska Range. And again, just flurries up over the Copper River Basin, staying dry over the interior, variably cloudy skies, and snow diminishing here over the Bering Strait areas and the Seward Peninsula, kind of hanging on there from Kivalina up to Cape Lisburne, but just flurries, and that whole pattern diminishing throughout the evening tonight. Pretty gusty winds, could see some blowing snow, reducing visibility to a half mile or less early this evening, and then that'll improve over the western Arctic coast. Stays dry through the eastern Bering Sea, some isolated snow showers for the Alaska Peninsula, really hit and miss, more mist there for the eastern Aleutians. And then this low center takes off to the east, so it drops off the picture here in the front, staying to the south, precipitation just grazing the west central Aleutians, more likely to staying dry, and an increase in the easterly winds there for Adak and Atka, chance of snow out towards Shemya. And this trough stays back to the west, so dry conditions right up to St. Lawrence Island. And then for tomorrow, this as this low center moves eastward, this will continue to pull northwestward and could bring some pretty good winds in across the southwest interior areas, western Alaska Range, 15 to 35 miles an hour, maybe some gusts as high as 40 to 50 miles per hour with that, with some rain and snow showers along the Prince William Sound area, Kenai Peninsula, back down along the Aleutian Range there, drying out over the Alaska Peninsula. Could be some snow showers here, remnants of that moisture. Very weak trough now, pushing northwestward. Maybe some flurries, isolated snow showers, Alaska Range area back down in toward the Kilbrook Mountains, and a few breaks out over the Yukon Delta. Same thing for the Seward Peninsula. Dry conditions all the way up to the north and across the northern interior as well as the North Slope. Day much like today for the Arctic coast, with generally easterly winds and areas of fog at times, mainly on the central and eastern side. This system keeps it wet over the southern panhandle during the day tomorrow, and the winds increase as well. Got some gales out here for the southern inside waters. Clarence Strait looking for southeast at 35 knots. Otherwise, small craft advisories along the central and south coast, and most of the moisture over the central areas southward, dry up to the north. Looks like a partly to mostly day for Yakutat over to about Cordova, and then you get into those showers. And looking ahead to Monday, this low center kind of just slips on up into Canada there and dissipates. This one pulls back to the northwest and weakens into a trough that looks something like this, and pulling back there, just barely catching the St. Lawrence Island area, maybe a few flurries, but isolated snow showers in Nunivak Island, mostly cloudy skies, isolated snow showers possible over the mountainous terrain in the southwest interior, mostly clear and dry up to the north there, and then an upper level disturbance forms up over the northeast interior. So it could be some light snow or scattered snow showers or flurries from the northern Koyukuk Valley all the way up to the eastern Arctic coast, but nothing significant at all. And some moisture kind of backs in here, bringing some flurries probably to Northway on down toward Nebezna. And that low center again moving into the Yukon there, trailing back with some scattered showers over the northern panhandle, but could become partly to mostly sunny down there over the southern southeast coast. Annette, Metlakatla, Klawock looking pretty good for Tuesday, and mild temperatures. And then the next system farther on down to the south. And then this low continues south of the area there, but kind of stalls. So the southeast winds, that'll push that front and moisture back to the northwest. So look for rain and snow to return to the eastern Aleutians, spreading westward, possibly as far west as Adak. Otherwise, just scattered showers to the Alaska Peninsula, and that to a lesser extent across Kodiak Island. Looking at temperatures today across the panhandle, lower 30s over the northern areas there, with Skagway at 33, mid 40s down over the central and southern panhandle. 48 at, I think it was Klawock, was a warm spot in the state today. Otherwise, lower 40s to the North Gulf Coast, Cordova at 40, 41 Middleton Island, 39 in Seward, 29 at Palmer, back up to 37 at Homer, and 12 degrees in Gulkana, -7 at Northway, Delta 20 above, then back down to 7 at Fairbanks, 9 over at Tanana, Fort Yukon right at 0, while Bettles had 6. And the Arctic coast generally below 0, especially on the central and east side areas there, with Barrow at -12, -15 at Dead Horse. Cape Lisburne up to 26 though. Upper teens to mid-20s here over the northwest with the areas of snow and clouds, and rather mild there for the Seward Peninsula, upper 20s to lower 30s. And also warmed up there, St. Lawrence Island, at least at Savunga, up to 28 degrees this afternoon. Otherwise, we've got some teens there over the Kuskokwim Valley, the northern areas, and then into the 20s on down to the southwest of the coast. And actually mid-30s there for northern Bristol Bay, 30s for the Pribilofs, 30s for the Aleutians. And for the Alaska Peninsula, 30s to lower 40s. Low temperatures forecast tonight, 30s to near 40 here over the southeast coast, mostly in the 20s for the North Gulf Coast, south central Alaska, below 0 north of the mountains there, all the way up into the North Slope and actually out to the Arctic coast. But we've got above 0 temperatures all the way up into the Noatak Valley there over the northwest, and mostly in the teens here over the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, 20s to near 30 for Bristol Bay, and lower 30s for the Aleutians. Highs for tomorrow shaping up again, 40s to near 50 here over the southeast coast, and those temperatures even be warmer on Tuesday. Otherwise, mid to upper 30s here across southern Alaska, lower 40s for Kodiak Island, the Alaska Peninsula, 20s over the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta areas, and 20s up to the Seward Peninsula, and also some teens and 20s there over the Noatak Valley area, 30s again for the Aleutians. Flying weather with that next batch of moisture coming northward. Look for IFR to spread northward during the day tomorrow there from Dixon Entrance up over the southern areas. Staying VFR up to the north over to about Yakutat, then east or west of Yakutat. Pick up some marginal VFR that could develop into some IFR here over western Prince William Sound and the Kenai Peninsula. VFR is a sit in the valley down into Cook Inlet, some IFR on the east side of Kodiak Island, also along the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range and over the Kilbrook Mountains. Pretty good conditions over the interior, just a patch of possible marginal stuff over the upper Yukon Valley. Chance of some IFR due to the fog there along the eastern Arctic coast. Bering Sea pretty good here over the eastern areas from St. Lawrence Island down to the Fox Islands. Just a chance of some occasional marginal VFR over the Aleutians with the IFR remaining to the south. Taking a look at the passes for both Hanatup and Ganadagan, good VFR throughout the day tomorrow. And moving along to Lake Clark and Merrill, lowest conditions, possibly IFR on the eastern entrances, and off to the west becoming VFR. Same pattern here for Rainy. Lowest conditions will be on the eastern entrance, possible VFR over into the valley. And for windy VFR, Mentasta or Isabel could be marginal at times. Otherwise, Mentasta will be VFR. And for Tanita, marginal VFR possible on the eastern entrance, not guaranteed. Could be just a VFR from one side to the other, but the chance of some marginal stuff on the eastern entrance. Portage, IFR, pretty sure thing for that area. And Chilkoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels with that system coming up tomorrow afternoon behind that warm front. So you can see quite a rise in the freezing levels down there. As high as 8,000 feet over the southern southeast coast, with 10,000 feet up to the Queen Charlottes, 2,000 feet along the North Gulf Coast into the southwest interior. And icing, could be some moderate rime icing here, widespread coming into the southern southeast coast with just lighter amounts up to the north, cutting off here over the northern panhandle. And then that leftover moisture coming northwestward here. Areas possible here in the shaded zone there with Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, up across south central Alaska, and then back out to possibly the Kuskokwim Delta, icing free over the remainder of the interior, and just a chance of some icing here if enough moisture manages to get northward there for the western and central Aleutians. That'll all be below about 8,000 feet. Looking at the winds aloft at 33,000 feet, the main jet here, south to north, you can see it's coming across the Pacific well to the south, and then takes a turn to the north here, so pulling that deeper moisture layer flowing up with that jet up to 125 knots into the northern panhandle. Southeasterlies, upper trough out through here, moving northwestward, so we only got 20 to 30 knots there. General ridging, not much wind at all at this elevation across the interior. 9,000 feet, again that low pulling into the southeast Bering or Bristol Bay area. Look for some pretty good winds, 45 to 60 knots from Kodiak Island to the western Alaska Range. Lighter and more northeasterly out to the west. And then we've got this system tracking northward, 50-knot winds there at the Queens Charlotte's into Dixon entrance, but lighter up over the Panhandle. 25 to 30 knots of the Gulf of Alaska into the North Gulf Coast. And at 3,000 feet, about the same pattern here. Not too bad on the winds there along the southeast coast. 40 to 50 knot winds around the center, pulling there to near Cape Newenham. Easterlies maybe up to 25 knots here in the west, and then the winds again just clipping the Aleutians out of the east and northeast. And for turbulence, occasional moderate chop, Kodiak Island up across the southwest interior, diminishing up to the north and northwest, smooth over the eastern interior, and most of this staying near or south of the Aleutians. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
We always knew the site was there, but we thought it was gone due to erosion. My grandfather would tell about the bow and arrow wars. About two kids, playing with darts. And one eye was poked, so the other kid's father came and did the same thing. So from that, it became a full-blown war. To see this excavation bring that story alive is one of the most fascinating things I've seen. I mean, the stories we've heard and the evidence they're pulling out from Nunatak, it's no longer a legend, it's becoming a fact.
My name is Rick Connect, and I'm principal investigator of the project. We have 11 PhDs. We use a lot of student volunteers. We work with professional conservators to make it all happen. We've got Dr. Paul Ledger, who's working on the history of climate here. Dr. Veronique Forbes, who's an archaeoentomologist who studies insects. Dr. P.T. Ashlock, who's also a professional archaeologist from Southeast Alaska. Dr. Madonna Moss is from the University of Oregon, who specializes in faunal analysis.
There are mussel shells throughout this site. There's another bigger piece, and we don't know where they're coming from.
The Nunatak site was originally a village. Elders tell us that this site extended out about 200 feet. Since 2009, we've lost more than 30 feet on that piece of shoreline. And our 2009 and 2010 excavation blocks are completely gone already. It's very much a race against time. But this particular structure with a covered boardwalk running down the middle of it was an adaptation to the bow and arrow wars. That was a period of intense conflict between different native villages here in the YK Delta. And no one knew exactly when it had happened other than it happened before the Russians arrived. This collective communal house was burned down by attackers from another village up the Kuskokwim. We think it happened about 1640 based on carbon dates of the charred grass and so on the floor.
We've been excavating Nunatak for about 6 years now. I sent Rick a few pictures of artifacts I had from the locals. He came right over. He didn't even unpack. He went down the beach and they started walking and they started finding artifacts. Those first group was a tough bunch. There's these 3 students and a professor that come down and start looking for artifacts. Wind, rain, shine, they do it. My mind was saying, man, these guys are crazy. But they're trying to beat the erosions.
We get bugs, we get weather, we get wind, we get rain. Ouch, there's one now. And so they're pretty challenging conditions. We put in as many hours as we physically can, 12 to 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, just so we can get to it in time.
Pizza! Give me P-I-Z-Z-A!
Rick's just great. He doesn't stop. He's a perfect person for this site. I wouldn't have no one else run this site except him.
Well, I first came to Alaska to work as a graduate student in 1983, and luckily it was a preserved site much like this one in Kodiak. And that one was also eroding, and we worked hard to get a sample from that, but at the same time our assumption was there were going to be more sites like that, and the whole thing washed out. There wasn't even a rock, a firecracked rock left behind. That was shocking. And we ended up only getting a 10% sample at best, and that's not going to happen again. We're getting things that normally you just see in museum collections. We've got arrows with the feathers still lashed to them, grass rope that was used to make dog harnesses, that kind of preservation.
There's a piece of hair right here. I found that in my screen. PT found a ridiculously large amount of hair, and Bridget found another huge clump of hair today. It seems like when they cut their hair, they just let it fall wherever it wanted to, so. There's the lamp. The hair is kind of sticking out right there. It's all over the place, actually. There's been way hairier lamps, too. It's like, oh, you find hair, and you're like, oh, this is like a hair sample, and then you dig a little more, and then it's actually a lamp.
Bridget found an earring in the screen.
Yeah, that's definitely faunal.
Yeah. And then I would have it goes up to about there, I think. So I don't know how they actually wore them, like how it fit in.
Yeah, they kind of look like clip-ons.
Yeah.
I've heard that we're up to around 30,000 museum quality pieces, which will be coming back to Queen Hawk in 2017. We're hoping to get a cultural center built here, and then I'm hoping all the artifacts will remain in the village.
We estimate the site might have 5 to 10 years left maximum. It could be lost in one big winter storm. It's like museums on fire or a library, and you have to rush in and save as many books and pieces of art as you can. And we're seeing things that people remember from their childhoods. Elders have a chance to reacquaint themselves and their children with tangible remains of their heritage.
Yeah, this project's been great. I'm just honored to be part of it, a small part of it.
Welcome back. The next system rolling up tomorrow. We've got small craft advisories south to southeast, 25 to 30 knots on the south coast, turning easterly for the central coast, and winds increasing southeast 35 knots for Clarence Strait, northeast 20 for Stevens Passage, Lynn Canal north at 20. And then for Tuesday, small craft advisories here for the central and northern inside waters, easterlies at 20 for Clarence Strait, easterlies at 25 knots for the south coast, northeast 20 to 25 for the north coast. And for Prince William Sound tomorrow, as well as the North Gulf Coast, southeasterlies 25 to 30 knots, and those become gales here. Barren Islands down the east side of Kodiak and into Kamishak Bay, and east 25 for Shelikof Strait, and Cook Inlet northeasterlies 20 to 30 knots. And then for Tuesday, much lighter winds, Prince William Sound, northern Cook Inlet, barely a breeze at all, 15 to 20 knot winds for the North Gulf Coast, and then 20 knot easterlies here across the Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, and more southeast there, up to 25 there for Kodiak Island. And for Bristol Bay tomorrow, easterlies at 30 knots, diminish and become northeast at about 15 there on the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula, southwest 15 on the Pacific side, and small craft advisories from Sitkinak to Castle Cape. And for Tuesday, easterlies 30 to 35 knots here right across the Alaska Peninsula, small craft advisories there for Bristol Bay. And out in the Aleutians there for the eastern areas, east to southeast, 20 to 30 knots, and then some gales here south of Adak and Atka on over toward Nikolsky with small craft advisories to the north, and then those turn northeast at 20 to 30 knots here for the western zones. And taking a look at Tuesday, northwest coming back up to gale force, minimum gales out here towards Shemya, Kiska Island, and then north to northeast 30 knots for the central Aleutians. Easterlies 30 increasing to 40 knots south of the Fox Islands. And for the southwest coast, northeast 20 to 25 tomorrow, northeast 20 for the Pribilof, St. Matthew Island. Brisk wind advisories again for St. Lawrence Island for those easterlies. Those drop off to 20 knots on Tuesday, and still small craft advisories here, Kuskokwim Bay, southeast of Nunivak Island, and the winds back up to about 25 for the Pribilofs. Same wind pattern here for the northern Bering Sea. Up along the Arctic coast, easterlies 25 knots here, all along the coastline up there with brisk wind advisories, lighter winds from Cape Beaufort all the way down to Wales. And 15 to 20 east and northeast here for the west side. Otherwise, 15 to 20 knot easterlies for the central coast, and 20 to 25, the strongest winds over toward Demarcation Point. And for tonight, again, that front, what's left of it as a trough, gets pushed northwestward, should push the moisture, rain, and snow again into Prince William Sound, over into Turnagain Arm, and gusty winds along with this system, rain and snow, Kodiak Island. Dry back in the west, diminishing snow tapering off tonight, and then that system again brings wind and rain into the southern panhandle. This one slides off to the east, just barely catching the Aleutians, and that's into Bristol Bay, and that weakens further and pulls way out to the west here. Rain for the eastern Aleutians as that front comes northwestward Tuesday, drier over the panhandle. Let's look at the weather. Thanks.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.